what data they have compiled. So according to the data, our economy has been through periods of growth and periods of recession. We are currently in a recessionary type of period right now. And it's very important that policies are implemented. And as economic students and business students would know, there are policies which government have at their disposal, right? Fiscal policies and monetary policies, which you all, I'm sure, know a lot about, which could be used. And embedded in some of these policies would be additional measures such as spending on education. So as we go along in subsequent slides, we're going to focus, on the evolving situation and the budget as a means of implementing measures to address this issue that we have right now, where the economy is in a recessionary type of mode. So moving along, I have just taken out the most recent 5 years of the same data, just to see what has happened over the last 5 years. So from 2008 to 2012, same national income. If you're looking at the number, 2008, roughly about $93 billion was our country's real gross domestic product. And for some reason, which we would see in subsequent slides, this has declined in 2009, right? Picking up to a very small extent in 2010 and then declining further in 2011, 2012 being a period where things are probably stabilizing, So according to the data, we are in a challenging period right now where real gross domestic product is heading in a negative direction. What is causing this? That's what I want to address. As you all would know, one of the main drivers of our economy is oil and gas. A significant amount of revenue is generated from the energy sector, which primarily originates from oil and gas. I'm using color codes here to distinguish between the two, with gas being in red and oil being in green. At a glance, it is clear that gas is more important in terms of volume. Gas is at least 6 times as large as oil production, just at a glance. Further scrutiny of the chart would show, if you focus on the red bars, which are measured, by the way, in barrel of oil equivalents and amount being produced per day, in 2008, this country produced just under 700,000 barrels per day. Now, I want to put that into perspective. Picture 1 barrel, and then picture 100 barrels. And then see if you can even move to 100,000 barrels. That's a large amount so far. We in Trinidad in 2008 produced just under 700,000 barrels. Not in a year, not in a month, but in a day. And that's the average for the entire year. Every single day of that year, on average, that's the quantity of natural gas that was produced in this country. So it shows that this country produces natural gas in a major way, more than what's needed for domestic consumption, definitely. And focusing on the red still, you would see that by 2010 it had risen just above 700,000. And by 2011 it had fallen, still being just around 700,000. And the data for 2012 indicates it's slightly less, it's about 650,000 thereabout. So natural gas production seems to be a little bit of a challenge in that it's decreasing in the recent experience. Still at a high level, but it seems to be decreasing. Crude oil, as you would see in green, it's smaller than gas, as I had mentioned. And if you look at the heights of the bars, starting with 2008, you would see 100,000, just over 100,000, in fact. And by 2012, if you just go to the end, it's definitely below 100,000. It's about 80,000, 80-something thousand. So oil production is also decreasing. According to the data that I have, which is sourced from the Ministry of Energy, oil and gas have both declined slightly. Now, remember the chart earlier with national income. National income is declining. So clearly, one possible reason for this decline in income of the country is declining production levels of oil and gas, respectively. Apart from production, well, before moving on to price, just wanted to point out, some of you are probably wondering what we're doing with 700,000 equivalent barrels of gas on a daily basis. This pie chart, which uses 2011 data, which is available, shows the main uses of natural gas, which is produced in Trinidad. Right away, the blue segment stands out. That blue segment is LNG. LNG stands for liquefied natural gas, which is produced in Point Fortin, right, in the south, and benefits the whole country nonetheless. What's very important is that this LNG is actually a means by which gas is exported. Gas is produced in Trinidad, offshore and onshore and so on, and to get it to foreign countries, it's converted into a liquid. And there are many advantages of converting to liquid, which I'm not getting into right now. But all that gas we produce in, 56% of it is exported. And remember, it's declining. Other major uses of the gas in Trinidad is methanol and ammonia, which you would see in green and red, respectively. Sorry, green, methanol, red, ammonia, just to be clear. They're both around 15%. Those two products are actually processed in the Point Lisas area, right? And they're also exported to a large extent. So if you include those three, LNG, ammonia, methanol, they account for the vast majority of the gas that we produce. And to a large extent, these products are exported. So our gas is produced and exported, and exports generate foreign exchange. All right? And foreign exchange is needed by the country to finance its imports, its importation expenditure, and so on. And if this gas is declining, it's sort of a challenge, because where's the revenue going to come from when it declines further? Another important factor which could have contributed to the decline in our national income recently is the price. And I've focused here on a time period starting with first quarter of 2008, which is March 2008, to as recent as I could get. And if this is my oil price, you could see in 2008, price was about $120 a barrel. It fell drastically in 2009, as you could see, to around $40 a barrel. That's a big fall. Imagine selling an item for $120, and a month after, the price falls to $40. That must have a big impact on the economy, on revenue generation, all these things. Since 2009, though, the price has gradually risen. It has not risen to its all-time high, but it's currently hovering around the $100 per barrel level. So at $100 per barrel, the country is earning some revenue, not sufficient, but a sizable amount of revenue from its oil that is being produced. But the price, as you would have noted, it's not as high as the all-time high experienced back in 2008. But why did the price fall in 2009, by the way? You would probably recall that in 2009, globally, economic challenges were divulged, and countries were, indicating that there's a global financial crisis, being experienced. So to a large extent, oil prices fell on account of that. We in Trinidad are affected by that situation, and it's one of the reasons why our national income, has been on a decline in the recent period. What about the price of our natural gas? If you look at this graph, it almost looks the same as the price of crude oil, except in the more recent time periods, such as December 2011, March 2012, June 2012, and so on, natural gas price is actually very low compared to its all-time high back in 2008. So we are producing, remember the 700,000 barrels of gas that we produce on a daily basis? We used to sell at a high price back in 2008, or the price internationally used to be at a high level, but currently the price is way lower. Let's use some numbers. It used to be somewhere around 12, just under 12, 11 something, according to the data that I have here. But currently the price is around 2. So imagine selling a product for 11 US, and then the price falls to 2 US. That's a big challenge. And we in Trinidad are experiencing this challenge right now as being manifested by the national income figures that I showed earlier, which are on the decline. So how does the budget, affect all of this or help the situation? We're going to go there. I am now going to switch attention now to revenue generation, not for the private sector, not for the oil companies, but for government. The government of Trinidad and Tobago depends on taxing companies and individuals, income earners basically in the country to earn revenue. And according to the numbers, you would see blue and orange, government energy revenue in 2008 was about 30 billion, over 30 billion in fact. And I just want to jump to 2013. Where is it? About 20 billion. So imagine earning 20 billion, and a couple of years on the road you're earning imagine earning about 30 billion in 2008, and a couple of years on the road you're now earning only 20 billion. That's a major challenge for government. Revenue from the energy sector has declined, largely on account of declining production as well as declining prices. So given that challenge of the revenue earning capacity the government is experiencing, and the need for policies to help revive the economy, the figures which demonstrates expenditure will be captured in this chart here. In red, the red bars that you see there shows the amount of money the government has spent in the past for the respective years. And in the case of 2013, it shows how much they project to spend in that period, which is the 58 billion that was mentioned earlier. So overall, given the challenge that the country is experiencing, government has decided to increase spending. And for the students in here who are aware, we call that expansionary fiscal policy, expanding government expenditure in an attempt to jolt the economy forward, to get the economy going again. So that's what we are seeing. Given the decline in revenue, coupled with the increase in expenditure, what do you think is happening? The economy is now experiencing deficits. The budget is now in deficit. Coming from 2008, where it was in surplus, above zero, you would see ever since then, when international financial crisis evolved and price fell and production started declining, a whole set of events happening all in one, the budget, the government finances is now in deficit. So this is a major challenge that the government is facing. And okay, my pointer is stuck. Experiencing a slight bit of technical problem here to move to my last slide. Let me try something. Maybe I hit the wrong button behind here or something. Let's see. To wrap up, yes. Right? So, given the challenge, as any person, institutional government would face, you always need to do something different. You always need to do something to address the issue. So all I'm going to say is, given the challenge that the economy is facing, one move that has been continued to be implemented is spending on education. Spending on education this year has been projected at $9.1 billion. And indeed, that's a good move given the challenge that the economy is facing. And not only would it increase expenditure and income currently, but education has the capacity to increase the productivity of the country. And increasing productivity is indeed something which is not immediate, but something which could be achieved over the medium to long term. And it's definitely a step in a good direction to help the economy move away from its dependence on oil and gas. So at this stage, I end with that slide that I meant to show up, showing the increase in government expenditure and projected increase in expenditure, which is going to happen this year. So thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to speak to you today, this morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bahaw, for that informative presentation. I think it sets the tone and the parameters for the discussions which we will have later this morning when Mr. Bahaw will have an opportunity to finish his presentation. It's now my pleasure, my distinct pleasure actually, to welcome Professor Winston Sweet to the podium Winston is an old friend and an old colleague, and I didn't know that he had joined the faculty at UTT. I also joined the faculty for 2 years, but I'm no longer there. I'm now retired. But Mr. Sweet is a professor of construction engineering and management, and has served the engineering community for more than 30 years as a practitioner and educator. His expertise is in concrete technology, contract law, infrastructure planning and development, and natural hazard management. With more than 80 refereed papers to his credit, a lot of papers, Professor Sweet has served as a consultant on numerous projects and has supervised many students working on their master's theses and other academic projects. A professor currently based at UTT San Fernando campus, Professor Sweet lends his services to a variety of local government committees and boards. He is, I know, able and informative, but the capacity in which I know him really is as a fellow political activist in the 70s, but he's not going to talk about that today. He's going to talk about the economy and the role of construction in that economy. Professor Sweet.
Good morning.
10 minutes, please.
10. All right.
Oh, God.
I'll try to. I would like to start the discussion in taking us back to 1990. And as I was looking at the last speaker present his first slide, I was looking for a refresher on my data. I remember vividly in 1990, there was a conference that was called in the Hilton Hotel, and it was entitled Kickstarting the National Economy, the Construction Sector. It's not the first time that people believe that the construction sector can kickstart the economy. In fact, it's not the first time in Trinidad, neither is the first time internationally. Well known in the literature is a famous American president coming out of the Great Depression of 1929-1935, where he sought relief for a stagnant economy by injecting funds into the construction sector. And this has remained as a recipe for many developed and developing countries. But I need to caution, as is my wont from time to time, that construction can create employment within a very short time with injection of money. And because of that, it is and continues to remain an attractive feature to political analysts and politicians. It can relieve a stickling unemployment problem as Obama is facing right now. But I need to point out that the employment that is created is usually low-skilled, semi-skilled, and unskilled. Construction, we must remember, is capital intensive, and therefore a great degree of the funds will follow machinery and capital and not labor. We will have to address the question of local content. That's another important matter. I remember attending a conference in Hilton again about 3 years ago when the Accountants Institute of Society, I can't remember which name they call themselves, assembled to discuss the state of the economy. And one of the issues that they were wrestling with was how do we increase the local component within, as it were, the sectors, particularly in the face of competition from outside. We have to look at the role of the foreign components, that is the importation of materials, machinery, which is usually high. We often have to import skills and even organization, the companies. The foreign contractors and foreign consultants that we often have to import to assist in this kickstarting. So we ask the question, how do we treat with the local and foreign actors? Can the local contractors and consultants compete? What about quality of work in construction? This is an issue that neither the contractors nor the clients talk about. But most observers note that construction work over the last decade to two has decreased in quality. Another important issue that we have to address is the question of productivity. And I refer you back to a previous time when we did have something called a productivity council. It faded away, and one wonders why, we have not returned to it. One of the things I would recommend is that in fact we have to refocus our attention on productivity, not only in construction, but in all sectors of the national economy, but particularly in construction. Can the local contractors or the local construction market, that's another important question, during the downturn, which is where we are now, satisfy the level of the local sector mobilization? The local sector has mobilized the resources, equipment, manpower, mental power through consultants to cope with the period of plenty. And when we have a period of scarcity, we now face a serious problem. It manifests itself through shortage of skills because some people migrate or their companies fail and they close down, and we have rising unemployment. Sometimes in our zest to advocate construction as a savior and dealing with that problem about the downturn period, how do we put the human resource and the machinery, etc., to work? Some people advocate maintenance and repairs. But let me caution that maintenance and repairs cannot compete with or replace in volume of activity new construction during a period of expansion. So I ask, if all these economic gurus would suggest that we could turn to construction to kickstart the economy, if construction is so important, and I am not denying that it is, the question I ask at this juncture, if the construction sector is so important, why do we not have roundtables to discuss the burning issues with the stakeholders? Why do we only wait until there is crisis to begin the discussion? The construction sector, I need to point out, feeds all the other sectors in the national economy and the social structure, all of them. It is necessary but not sufficient. In other words, to focus on construction and not focus on the other sectors which it is supposed to feed or focus or sustain would be a great misfortune. Construction and the construction sector cannot stand alone. It cannot be developed or planned in isolation. It must be developed ahead of the other sectors, that is before, in anticipation of. It must be developed in anticipation because it can only facilitate development. I wish to point out, because of the limited time, that there are only some issues in respect of construction and the construction sector that we can deal with today. First, we must talk about infrastructure. Infrastructure is a critical aspect of the built environment, and it will be the principal or the main, if not the only aspect that I will talk about here today. The central question I will pose is not how much or what percentage of the budget has been allocated to this construction sector. The question I will pose is what are the endpoints or the subjects that the infrastructure is intended to service? What role does construction and infrastructure play in the national economy and the new developmental trust? And I list three issues. One, a focus on infrastructure development. Secondly, a legislative agenda to enable the development. And three, the institutional framework. I will briefly touch on some of these in point form. In respect of infrastructure, I wish to point out, well, I could start by saying I was in China a few years ago, and one of the things that struck me is that the Chinese government had spent the last decade and a half in building superhighways to connect every part of the country, all rural communities. First, the aim was to permit people from the rural communities to come to the urban centers where the employment was taking place. But the ultimate aim was to trigger development in the rural communities so that the industry and the development that is in the urban centers could move outwards. And today what we are seeing is the benefit of spending a lot of money on infrastructure, particularly roads. So I wish that we in Trinidad, now we talk about construction in the context of the discussion and the debate, that what we should be considering is focusing on several roads that have been on the agenda for more than 40 years. We have a highway along the north coast. I remember this when I was an engineering student. When I was a final year engineering student, one of the assignments we did was looking at the highway to take us from where San Fernando Tech is to the east coast. We have the highway to build from Sangre Grande to Toco. We have a highway, I see one of the ministers mentioned it recently. We have been talking about building a highway into Chagaramas, which will possibly allow the development of Chagaramas with all its potential. That is point A. We have to look at the question of putting all our highways on the front burner. There will be those who would say, we don't have the money, we shouldn't be doing it. My contention is look at China. In fact, now is the time when we should be doing it. The next thing I want to put on the agenda, it might not be a popular issue, it seemed to have been put on the back burner. The Minister of Finance said that in his list of projects. I believe that we have to return to the question of a rail transport linking North Trinidad and South Trinidad on the one hand, partly for passengers and partly for goods. but we have to look at some form of rapid transport that connects the west of the island to the east of the island if we have to industrialize or spread development east, particularly in the Waterfield area. We have to look at the question of the development of a water network. We complain about WASA and what we do